Good morning, everyone. Going to be having a little look at the Meeting Owl today. I hope this will be useful to you. So I will be moving this around, the camera around. So this is the Meeting Owl in question. These will be positioned in all of the main teaching rooms in the ARB. So in SG1, SG2, S1, 2, 3. And I believe the smaller meeting rooms as well, such as 138, we've got a decent stock of them. I think there's sort of 6 or 7 of them dotted around. And the aim is that they'll be just permanently stationed in a teaching room, so you won't have to book them out in advance of the lecture, or hopefully sort of go in and it won't be there and you've got to find out how to source it. Each one should just have an assigned one. So it looks a little bit interesting, but effectively kind of think of it as a really big webcam with a microphone on. You can see at the top here, it can capture you in 360 degrees, which we'll see in a little bit. And it's not too tricky to work out. So 2 cables in the box, one of which is the power cable. I'll spare you me going under the desk. I've kind of done that part. On the bottom of the owl, you can see we have 2 ports. This one here, I've plugged in the communications cable for the owl, and this one here is the power cable. So it's a little bit fiddly, but it just goes in the bottom there like that. And you'll see, if I flick him over, his little eyes light up. Then the other end of the USB cable, see the other end went into the owl. Yep, and he hoots when he's ready. Don't know if you heard that, but when it's set up, it hoots at you. At the other end of the comms cable, the USB cable, just goes into any USB port on the machine where you're working. So then we'll give that a little minute to say it'll hoot at you when it's sort of ready, and you might get a pop-up at the bottom of the machine saying something along the lines of "we're setting up the owl" or something like that. This one I've sort of played with before. Each of these do have to be registered the first time they're used, but this is something that sort of premises should be doing beforehand. I think all the ones we have been registered already, because we've been playing with them and testing them out. So they should just be fine to use as they are. So if it isn't left plugged in, we've plugged it in. And then we just go to whatever software we're using to host our meeting. So in this case, Zoom. I've tried it also with Teams. It probably works with other sources if we have them. I haven't tried it with Google Meets or anything like that, but very common platforms I can imagine it would work well with. So just from in Zoom here, I'm going to start a new meeting. And it's already detected that the owl should be the microphone and the camera, overriding if it had another camera plugged in. Right, I'll pop this down a little bit because I want you to be able to see the screen is split at the moment into 2. So you've got one that's focused on the main speaker and one that's sort of a panorama. If I go over here so it can't find me and talk a little bit more, hello, 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 you see it's panning over to find me. If I go even more out of range and keep talking, hello, still talking, still presenting. Yeah, it might be a little bit difficult to see on my screen, but it's panning to find me. And it's supposed to, yeah, you see it just adjusted again as it heard that I moved. It's supposed to be very clever and to focus on sort of continuous presenting and not go and zoom in on what's essentially sort of background chatter or what have you, because it'd be pretty pointless if it was flitting around looking at every sort of piece of noise in the room. It's supposed to become familiar with speakers' voices as well, so that it will track you it will track and pan to you quicker if it's become sort of familiar with you. How that works is beyond me, I've got to admit. But yeah, so if you had sort of speakers in multiple locations, what it sometimes does is it might put a line down the middle here and split these two into two separate ones. It's a little difficult to demonstrate, unfortunately, when it's just kind of me in the call. But this would be a good one to kind of have a little play around with. So yeah, then the main aim would be that you would have the main focus on the speaker, and then you'd probably have the whole sort of hall of attendees in the top bar. Alternatively, if you're using it for, and it's more kind of designed for people sitting around a meeting table rather than sort of a static presenter that isn't kind of really moving, we can use it for that, but it's more meant for, you've got people around the table and it's flitting around to find whoever's speaking at that point, so you're not all sort of clustered around trying to get in view of the web camera. Other than that, it largely just kind of works much as you'd expect a microphone and a web camera too. You see, I just sort of plugged it in and it detected it. I didn't have to set it to be default camera or default microphone. It should just override whatever's already in there. Yeah, so we go from here. We have our Zoom meeting or our Teams meeting. For some reason, it's a shrunk. Hey, I'm up here. Thank you. So yeah, you'll have your Teams meeting or Zoom meeting as normal, just using this as the camera instead of a static camera, and then simply end your meeting when you're ready to. That's pretty much all I can think of for sort of the day-to-day usage of it. I don't know if anyone had any particular questions about it. There may be things I'm not sure on, but I can certainly ask.
Hi there, thank you. That was really helpful. I was just wondering about the person at home tuning in on this. If they then want to participate, they speak, will we hear them through the microphone in the OWL?
Yeah. So I imagine it would split the screen to give them their own little section as they're speaking. Okay. Obviously, they wouldn't have one of these at home. They'd probably have a standard webcam and microphone, but it ought to divide the screen up to show the most sort of recent speakers. And yeah, this look would just come out of here as it would an actual microphone. With sort of standard teaching rooms, it's worked fine. We've had a little trouble at sort of the very back of SG1. So say if you're using the two rooms combined, sometimes it can't reach the whole way sort of into SG2. But as far as I'm aware, that room is sort of getting renovated anyway to put in cameras and microphones in place, in which case they would supersede the use of these, and these would be more for the upstairs teaching rooms, the smaller ones.
Great. So the people sitting in the room won't necessarily be able to see the person depending on where they're sitting in relation to the screen, but they should be able to hear them quite well.
Absolutely, and it should pick up their face after a little while. As it takes sometimes a second or two to realise the focus has shifted, but it should then highlight them. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And Andy, just following up on that, presumably you can get the picture projected on the screen as well that you show. So in that case, the people in the room, in those rooms at least that have screens, which is most.
Yeah, absolutely.
People would be able to see them if they're in the room.
Yeah, if you've got the actual call on the main screen, then yeah, that's what kind of would be displayed. Yeah, that's all pretty cool.
So what happens if you're presenting a PowerPoint? Does it affect that in any way? Or is it just normal? You're just sharing your screen through Zoom?
I think like normal Zoom behavior, if you were sharing your screen, sorry, I just flip my camera around. If you were sharing your screen, you'd have that over here, and then your speaker's window would kind of get shoved up the corner, much as it does when you're usually presenting something, because you want the focus to be on what you're sharing rather than faces at that point. So yeah, it would be minimized and boxed in the corner.
And if we we're using our own laptops, can we just plug it into our own laptop, or do we need to download software in advance?
Completely. I'd never used it in my machine before today. It should just, as long as you've got a USB port and a plug socket, it should just plug in.
Okay, great.
And it sort of installed the whatever drivers it needs itself. So the window didn't come up for me the second time, but the first time it did. So yeah, I hadn't tried it on my own machine before. Yeah, it seems to work okay so far. I think we'll just kind of have a play with it, and then if it's presenting a lot of issues, let your course admin know, and they can probably come and troubleshoot. But hopefully, it's going to be pretty painless. No different from just having a static webcam, just that it does a few more things.
Andy, can I just check this? Is then, because I might be getting slow, the assumption is then that things are being set up to do this as Zoom, essentially via Zoom in advance, so that basically everybody attending could be in principle attending the lecture needs a scheduled Zoom call for the teaching session.
I think this is more just in my understanding was this would be used if you were going down a hybrid route. Presumably, if everyone's in person, then this wouldn't.
But what I'm presuming was, I mean, I was intending to be lecturing in person, but I understood that the issue is, the concern, I should say, is with people who might not be able to attend, say that they were isolating at any point, or that there were people who haven't been able to arrive on time at the beginning of term because they're getting out of Australia or something like that.
I think it would be that
this is for them. So on that basis, though, won't it need to be the case, given particularly with the large lectures, that we wouldn't really know who all those, say, like the part ones. I know that they're not actually in the Alison Richard building, but I'm presuming that an hour will be available in the Lady Mitchell Hall, which is where the part one lectures are.
That one I'll ask about, because it might be a space of that size. It might struggle with. So I'll see what's happening with Lady Mitchell. It might be an alternative solution in there.
Okay.
So I don't know how well it's going to cope with a hall of that size.
Yeah, because as well, then we would need absolutely accurate lists, because everybody who could in principle be attending would need to be sent a link in advance of.
I mean, obviously it gets riskier the more attendees you have, because you've got to have somebody vet them as they turn up in the waiting room and say, well, are you on my list? Or you just got to kind of semi-trust them that if they've got the passcode and what have you, hopefully they've got that in a legitimate fashion. But then it is very easy to mute and kick people out.
Well, I'm less worried about that, to be honest, than making sure that the people who might need the link actually get them.
Yeah, I mean, what I did last year was I put a list of the logins for each lecture on Moodle, and that seemed to work quite well. I don't know if undergrads use something slightly different.
Can I just jump in? Can I just jump in here? Yes. So Helen's absolutely right. Every lecture, you should assume that someone won't turn up. So every lecture should have a repeated Zoom link somewhere on Moodle to all attendees. So that's worth setting up at the beginning.
Okay, Jude, can I just check this? So the assumption is that for lectures, students can attend them live, because the other option would be to simply record them and they can see them. I mean, seminars is a different story when it's really hybrid. That's obviously where this system seems to be designed for, so that they can live attend. But are we assuming that they can also live attend any big lectures that we could also record and make available afterwards as an alternative? Yeah,
sure. I mean, the assumption is in-person teaching, according to the risk assessments, as long as everyone's wearing masks in the ARB in particular, but there are other rooms with different risk assessments, but we'll go into that another time. But yes, I mean, if you can't manage the Zoom link for whatever reason, then you want to make a recording, or we're not really being very prescriptive on how you do that, but it would obviously be a bit easier if you're using the OWL to use the Zoom link. But yeah.
Okay, it's just for clarification.
Can I ask about that? Because I was wondering, as in this is being recorded now, I mean, if students were coming to lectures or seminars virtually, do we have to ask everyone if they give their permission to be recorded so that everyone knows they're online, all that kind of stuff, like we were told last year.
So Emma's sending out an email, and I think the way we're going to try and handle it, we are slightly experimenting here, is that we say this will be recorded, and there's going to be an opt-out rather than an opt-in. So if someone really has a problem with it, then we'll have to deal with that case by case. But I'm hoping that students will understand that we're trying to cater to people who might be stuck or whatever, so they won't mind. But we'll just have to kind of see how it goes, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully that makes sense.
Sorry, to follow up on that, because we also have to record our lectures, right? That's
live stream or record. It's up to you, really. I mean, I prefer to live stream. You don't have to record if you don't want to.
Well, okay. Well, the message that I seem to be getting from the university is that they will be recorded, but
I mean,
that's at least what I mean. We in broad terms, we had a discussion about this yesterday. It was mentioned. Some things were mentioned in the university council and stuff. But
okay, well, I mean, I'm just operating according to the school, and it's been quite difficult to come up with a plan. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. No,
but in discussions with Chris and with Tim, we've kind of come up with people should do what they're comfortable with. Not everyone is very comfortable with recording their lectures, and so either live stream or recording, as long as there's some kind of way of communicating the content of the lecture to the students who can't be there, that's good enough.
It's not mutually exclusive either, obviously, but
no.
Can I just ask, Jude, what do you think about, I mean, where's the responsibility going to lie for making sure that everybody who needs to have access to a Zoom link for these lectures going to fall? Because as we know, there's lots of chopping and changing as things in normal circumstances at the beginning of term about what papers people were doing. It seems to me this puts a very high premium on paper organisers or somebody having lists that are actually complete and not going to be subject to much chopping and changing.
Yeah.
By the time the first lecture starts. Otherwise, we're going to have people saying, oh, I was supposed to be in this lecture, but I didn't have access.
Sure. Okay, so I think last year it was a bit of a mix, but maybe we should think about this more systematically. It might be that there's a designated Zoom link for the paper on the paper guide, which is on Moodle. I mean, something like that, where it's very easy for everyone to use the same link.
I think that would be really helpful, because otherwise I can see if we've got to keep updating sort of group email lists and things, I just think that's a recipe for chaos.
Yeah. Okay, I'll let me talk to Emma about that, and I think that's the best way to go, that we have a standard repeatable link for each lecture on Moodle on the paper guide.
Great, thanks.
If you set the meeting appointment up as a template, it should maintain the same login details. Okay, were there any sort of further questions for me about this one? If not, I'll make sure I get the recording up, and we'll do another one 10 o'clock next week if people need it. If not, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
See you all soon.